Dear friends, welcome to the channel The Eastern Front. In World War II, the ground forces actively used small arms, but often when soldiers of enemy armies faced each other face to face, the most effective means was cold steel and first of all army knives. Hand-to-hand fighting in World War II was not uncommon. By the way, I have a video on my channel about hand-to-hand fighting in the World War II. The link will appear in the right corner. Probably the main impulse for the Red Army, which forced its leadership to think about creating regular cold weapons for its soldiers, was the experience of the Winter War of 1939-1940, when the Soviet Union entered into an armed conflict with Finland. Remembering the cold weapons of the Great Patriotic War, it's worth naming three of the most popular samples. Moreover, each subsequent one was created on the basis of the previous one. In the Winter War, the Red Army received several important lessons that helped it better prepared for another war with Nazi Germany. Some of them concern the effectiveness of certain types of weapons, which were not taken quite seriously in the USSR before. There is an opinion that these are submachine guns and army knives. Actually, the use of this type of weapons is interrelated. If you use a short-barreled automatic weapon, then the bayonet to it most often will no longer fit. Therefore, submachine gunners were most often armed with army knives. In the Karelian forest, where Finns often used partisan methods, it was difficult for Red Army soldiers armed with their rifles with bayonets to resist Finnish soldiers armed with the convenient pulka knives in close combat. But this weapon was especially effective in the hands of scouts and fighters of the special force of the Suomi country. Here its main advantages were noiselessness and compactness. And although the fighters of the Red Army didn't have such weapons, Soviet people were familiar with the Finnish knives for a long time and well, since pre-revolutionary times when the Finland was part of the Russian Empire. Russians also learned about these knives from the Finns and even set up their production. The most popular were Finks among the criminals as well as that part of the professional revolutionaries. In the USSR in 1935, a ban was imposed on the possession of Finnish knives for the civilian population, but they made them part of the equipment of law enforcement offices. Since then, this type of cold steel is sometimes called NKVD knives. And after the Winter War, it was decided to supply automatic weapons to the army and establish the production of regular army knives based on the Finka that has long been familiar to our men. And by 1941, when Finland again became an ally of Hitler's Germany, the Red Army was already armed with an army knife that was in no way inferior to pukko, and in some aspects superior to him. This cold weapon, which entered service with the Red Army, which many habitually continued to call the Finka, is most often called the Scout Knife NR40, and this name is found even in the official literature. Sometimes it's also called the submachine gunner's knife, since it was the submachine gunners of the Soviet armed forces who were the first to receive this weapon. It was also received by other units, being considered a regular knife of the Red Army. Officially, it was called NR40, that's an army knife of the 1940 model. But although this cold weapon was produced in large quantities, there was not enough of it for everyone. True, the fighters of the reconnaissance, sabotage and other special units were all armed with the NR40. This is understandable because often a knife for a scout is the most suitable and effective weapon, and in certain situations the only possible one. Probably that's why the second, more commonly used name of this universal knife was Scout Knife. The main difference between the NR40 and the classic Finka is the presence of an S-shaped guard with a non-standard reverse bend. This form made it more convenient to inflict the most common blows on the enemy. This knife, made of carbon steel, had a blade 152 mm long and 22 mm wide. Its weight is about 150 grams. The wooden scabbard and the handle for camouflage were painted black. Soviet enterprises produced knives according to this standard. but the products of small repair shops could differ from the classic model. An important advantage of the NR40 was the possibility of its use not only for knife fighting but also for household purpose. For example, it could be used to cut wires or open cans. In particular, the SS and SA daggers, used by the Germans since the beginning of the war, were not suitable for household purposes, which is why the German army subsequently ordered army knives for the Solingen Company on the model of ordinary kitchen knives. The NR40 knife served in the Red Army since 1940 and after the war began to be used in some Warsaw Pact countries. It was taken out of service only in the 60s. Created on the basis of the NR40 by 1943, the NR43 cherry knife differs little from its predecessor, but it served much longer. Some Russian special forces still use these weapons. Actually, the cherry didn't get into the combined arms units. They were armed exclusively with the special purpose units of security agencies. The NR43, unlike the NR40, has a straight guard and a slightly longer blade, length 158 mm. For this knife, the wooden scabbard was replaced with leather. The handle was made not of wood, but of impact-resistant plastic. It got its nickname Cherry because of the stamp on it, in the form of the letter R, shaped like a cherry berry. Army knives NR43 of the 1943 model are still used for their intended purpose, and although their predecessor NR40 was discontinued back in the 60s, it remains popular among collectors and fans of edge weapons even today. In addition, modern manufacturers use the appearance or name of the famous Scout knife as a successful commercial trick. Modern replicas of the legendary knives of the Great Patriotic War are in constant demand at Russian weapons exhibition. The most common replicas of the NKVD Finka. Often on the handle of these knives there is a Red Army asterisk, which was absent on the original knives of wartime. Recently, even folding versions of these knives have appeared. Dear friends, that's all for today. Write please in the comments if somebody wants to get such a knife or not in collections. It was Tim and the Eastern Front channel. I wish you peace and health. See you.